So I'm going to talk a little bit today about disaster preparedness. I'm honored to give the first lecture in the module, and Dr. Burke will help me out quite a bit for this. We're going to talk a little about what to do in the setting of a disaster. So what makes a disaster? All right, besides the first 2 hours we spent today. This is probably a disaster, right? A flood that knocks everything over, pushes everything around. Superstorm Sandy, hurricane. A lot of people get injured, a lot of property is damaged. Definitely is a disaster. Train wreck. A volcano exploding. And then having no coffee on a Monday morning. Maybe that's a disaster. So the goals here are to talk about the definition of a disaster. And then look at some of the man-made versus natural disasters. Talk about specifically CBRNE, which we'll go over what they are, and a little bit about what the response to a disaster should be. It's important for you guys because it's what we do. So you're going to have to deal with them should a disaster occur. And I will tell you that I've had a little bit to do with this in the past. I got sent to South Africa to Cape Town just before the World Cup when it was there to make sure all the hospitals around the soccer stadium were ready for a disaster. If something were to happen at the World Cup, we had to be able to deal with it, the hospitals there. So there are 7 hospitals around the soccer stadium in Cape Town, and we went to all the hospitals to make sure they were ready for disaster. So a disaster is a sudden event, such as an accident or natural catastrophe, that causes great damage or loss of life. This is really a broad definition, but pretty much every single time you have a disaster, supplies are overwhelmed by need. And this kind of makes sense to you. Something really, really bad happens, and people have to deal with the aftermath and the repercussions. So natural disasters, you guys I'm sure know this already. Tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, mudslides that happens out in California all the time, tsunamis in Japan. There's a volcano in Hawaii. Every day a volcano erupts. The lava crawls a little bit closer to the homes. Hundreds of houses have been destroyed in the last couple of years. Floods, we see that all the time. And then fires. There's fires going on in California right now that are destroying houses, destroying forest land. And then man-made disasters. Man-made could be on purpose or accidental. The Valdez oil spill was an accidental disaster that killed millions and millions of wildlife. Chernobyl, how many people got injured there? And then there are purposeful disasters that are caused by terrorism. All right? Chemical disasters, biological, nuclear explosives, we're going to talk about all these specifically. So CBRNE is the ones that you guys need to know and be familiar with for your in-service test. And these are the different ways that terrorists or even events just happening can cause disasters close to us. Right? CBRNE stands for chemical, biological, radioactive and nuclear, and then explosions. So chemical disasters. Chemicals are meant to either kill or injure people. And if you can't kill them, you can at least incapacitate them. This rocket tip is filled with VX gas, and you can see if a small shell explodes it over a population, they're all covered in VX gas. It's going to cause a lot of problems. And then it can cause panic. Think about it, if you're fighting in World War I, you're in the trenches, and there's a yellow cloud of gas starts to float over you. And you've never seen it before, you have no idea what it is. And all of a sudden, the guy standing next to you grabs your skin, and he starts to blister, screaming in pain, and he falls to the ground. Well, that's going to freak you out. You don't know what that is? But I don't want to be there anymore. I don't want nothing to do with that. And everybody's going to turn and run. Well, it's really easy to win a war when everybody you're fighting against turns and runs. So it causes panic. The 4 things that are usually the chemicals that most people will use against you, or that if a factory explodes will cause you problems, are these 4 agents. The blistering agents, also known as the vesicants, these are typically like mustard gas. And this is like a yellow to dark brown gas, depending on which one you're talking about. And when it gets on your skin, it burns intensely. And then it starts to form these yellow blisters that are filled with yellow liquid. And it's really painful. It's a pretty effective way to hurt or injure people. The nerve agents, these are stuff like soma and sarin, VX. And basically what these are, these agents stop acetylcholinease from working. So if you have too much acetylcholine in your cleft, it just doesn't get turned off. This causes problems, right? You guys know a drug that does this, it's acetylcholine. It just puts a ton of acetylcholine in your cleft, doesn't get rid of it, or turns on the signal, and then you become paralyzed. So if you're paralyzed in the operating room or in the emergency room, you do okay. But if you're paralyzed out in the street or in a subway in Japan, you probably won't do so well. Choke agents, these are like phosgene, ammonia, and chlorine gas. These agents get into your lungs and they cause you to cough, they cause edema, and then you start to fill up with fluid. If you have fluid in your lungs, you don't have adequate gas exchange, adequate oxygen exchange, and you end up having problems. And then the bloodborne agents like cyanide, these block your body from using oxygen on a cellular level. And you can see how this would be a problem too. They're pretty effective, they work pretty quick, and they'll kill you pretty fast. So treatment, I want to make sure you guys get some education out of this lecture, not just an introduction. So the treatment for the blistering agents is really not very much. Just get the agent off of you, don't let it do much anymore, right? These blistering agents are sort of an oily, kind of sticky material, so it's really hard to get it off your body. These guys got to be decontaminated, but you're scrubbing like yellow fluid-filled vessels. That's kind of like painful for the patient, so you got to make sure you do it in an adequate way, but it's really just supportive care. For the nerve gases, you have too much choline, acetylcholine in your clefts, so you want to get something that combats that, like atropine. All right. The other thing you can use is 2-PAM or prilidoxine. When those agents bind to your acetylcholine esterase, they can come off eventually. But once they bind for a little while, they become permanent, and then you can't get them off. Then you have to synthesize new enzyme in order to fix it. So if you can give them prilidoxine, it actually stops it from becoming a permanent bond, and eventually your body will get rid of it. But if you don't stop it, it becomes permanent. The enzyme is permanently out of business. These choke agents, pretty much supportive care. You can put them on positive pressure ventilation, that may help them a little bit. If you don't, maybe you have extracorporeal oxygenation, that might work. But until your body can fix it and clean out your lungs, you're kind of going to be drowning inside yourself. So it's really just mostly supportive care, and then figure out a way to get them oxygen. And then for the cyanide-like agents, we used to use Cyanokit, which was a 4-agent regimen that really just needed 2 of them, which is the sodium thiosulfate and the sodium nitrate. This may be on your in-service. They like to ask these questions. Now we just use vitamin B12, which is hydroxyqualamine. It's a little bit easier to use, a little bit quicker, and just as effective as the Cyanokit. So biological disasters, we deal with this stuff all the time. It may not be forced out there by man. Maybe it's, H1N1. Maybe locust. That was an early plague that we saw a long time ago. Ebola, cholera, measles. When these things start to spread and get out of control, they can cause huge problems. A terrible amount of people can get sick from them. The other thing you can do is you can weaponize these things. Some people will take anthrax and take out really potent varieties of it and then spread it around. Luckily, we haven't had this happen that much yet, but many years ago we did. But if people start to spread this stuff, you can see how it would really cause a lot of problems. Your radiological nuclear disasters, basically there are 4 different types of nuclear particles, and depending on what your starting material is, it'll decide which particles come out of the material. So the alpha particles are relatively big nuclear particles. They don't travel very far, maybe an inch or 2. But if you had dust that had alpha particles being emitted, and you inhaled it, or you got it in your ears, you got it on your skin, if it's only got to travel an inch or 2 and it's on you already, you can see how it would cause a lot of problems. The beta particles are a little bit smaller and travel a little bit farther, and you can defend yourself with just like some metal shielding, and it'll keep you from getting it. But again, if you breathe it in, it's going to cause you a big problem. And then gamma rays, these travel really far. These are sort of like light rays. It's hard to protect yourself against these unless you have lead. If you think about it, it's really easy to make a nuclear dispersion device or a dirty bomb. You have some explosive material put next to a container of finely ground radioactive material. And this could be anything, right? You think that where would I get this kind of stuff? Well, I looked on the internet yesterday, and you can go to IndiaMart and buy radium. Radium is the stuff that's on your watch dials that makes it glow. And you can buy this just today on the internet. So if a terrorist wanted to put this stuff in a container and disperse it, they really could do it. I looked this up yesterday, last night. Again, plus you have the dirty bombs. I'm not going to tell you whose computer I used to do it. Somebody's office in our department. No, I'm joking. So when explosions go off, usually what they have is some sort of fuel source that burns very quickly. And as it burns, it expands. And that's going to cause a big pressure wave to come out of it. When that pressure wave hits you, it causes injury. On top of that, as the pressure wave spreads, it forms a vacuum right behind it. And that vacuum will suck out anything and drag it into the vacuum. So as the pressure wave expands, it goes out, and the vacuum follows it, and it just drags things with it. So if there was a bunch of ball bearings inside the bomb when it went off, it's going to take those ball bearings and disperse them. And the chair that was sitting next to it, it splinters it, and those things follow it. And you can get hit by all these things. So when you have a bomb go off, there's a really typical injury pattern. There's actually 4 kinds of injuries that we can talk about. Primary injury is caused by the blast itself. So your gas is expanding, and that shock wave caused by the gas hits you, and it causes damage to your body. Really typical damage is for your lungs, for your tympanic membranes, but almost anything else can be injured too. The second type of injury is from the propelled object. So it's those ball bearings, it's the fractured chair. As the blast wave goes past you and drags these things, you can get hit by them also, right? And that causes shrapnel, and that causes the type 2 injuries. Tertiary injury, as that wave hits you, it'll toss you, or as the suction goes past you, it'll drag you, and it'll throw you 60 feet in the air. So that's really not very good for your body either, being tossed 60 feet. That's the tertiary injury. And then quaternary injuries is everything else besides those three. Usually it's burns, but they can come up with some other stuff too. But there's 4 different ways a blast can hurt you. So let's look at a little bit comparative risk, just to get an idea of how much terrorism attacks can really happen to you. If you smoke 10 cigarettes a day, you have a 1 in 200 chance of dying. That's actually pretty bad if you think about it. Car accidents, I'm not sure if this is Brooklyn or not. I tend to think not. It's too much of a number, not even close enough to this. But you have a 1 in 8,000 chance of being hit or killed by a car. Compare that to something like a terrorism attack. After 2001, it's 1 in 100,000. It's really a big difference. It's really much safer or it's much less likely to be blown up in a terrorism attack than it is to smoke cigarettes. So take these things into account when you think about your numbers. And then of course, anthrax and smallpox. These are really rare. It's hard to get these. They purposely make them very unavailable to humans or very unavailable to people. So it's 1 in 50 million. Right? But just think about these numbers when you're counseling your patients or when you're talking about being scared, being frightened, and how much it can affect you. So preparation, what do we do? Well, CMS says there are 4 phases of preparation. All right? Mitigation is just to lessen the effect of a disaster. And we can do a lot of things to that. We can plan. We can know where our supplies are in our hospital. We can know where the extra ventilators are. There's a ton of different things that we can do to mitigate the damages caused by disasters. Preparation, super important. You may know where the vents are in your hospital. Somebody may know, but it may not be people working that day. So by drilling and people getting practice at finding all the ventilators, where are they in the back room? Knowing who to call. Do you guys know to call Julie Eason, who's in charge of all the ventilators at Downstate? So knowing who the right person to call is also very important. So by drilling, you guys prepare for the worst things to happen. Of course, your response, you're going to follow your disaster plan. We'll talk about this in a second, but it's super important for you guys to follow a plan. People who are specialists in this realm have created a plan for you to follow, and it just makes your life much easier, as long as you can find your plan. And then recovery, as soon as you start to deal with the disaster, you already go into the recovery phase. You're trying to push your disaster occurrence back towards the realm of normal. So as soon as you start your response, you're already trying to get back to normal. That's your goal. So where is your disaster plan? I bet here nobody knows where it is. You have to go look. But I went and found it. There's actually a tab on Clinical Monster down at the bottom that lists our disaster plan. It may not be the most up-to-date this year, but I've been assured by Dr. Okula that it will be updated at some point in the next couple of weeks. There's a disaster response tab at downstate.edu. You can also go there. And then this is actually where our current disaster plan is. If Dr. Okula is around during a disaster, I'm sure she can get it for you. I'm sure everybody in the disaster, in the headquarters, in the middle of county and downstate, they can get it also. Remember when you're treating patients, they all should go through decon before you deal with them, because your goal as a healthcare provider and a physician is not to become a patient. So if they have some substance on them, a mustard gas, phosgene, and they're off-gassing, you don't want to take that gas on also. You don't want to be contaminated. So make sure they get decon first. They then go to triage, and somebody in triage is going to decide where they're going to go, whether they go to room A, room B, room C, or get sent home. And then they go for definitive treatment. If it's trauma, if it's a blast, then you know how to treat regular trauma. You know how to deal with that. Maybe for blast injuries, there's special stuff like tympanic membranes, lung injuries, but you guys can deal with trauma. You do that every day. For infectious agents, you may need a little bit more information. Go to the CDC, go to the CDC website. It'll help you figure out what to do, but I'm sure you'll have leaders in the control room that'll tell you what to do. The hospital has a system of who's going to run a disaster. There will be one person from the ED in charge of the ED, but it should be open upstairs in the command center, and this is the hierarchy of people that are going to be up there. There'll be an incident commander that's going to be in charge of everything. And then there's a liaison officer, information officer, and safety officer who are trying to organize stuff as a second tier. And then there are all these chiefs that should be able to disperse information and do other stuff as you move down the list. All right? Does anybody have any questions about that stuff? So I know the lecture was short. It only gave me 10 minutes. It's a new style. We're trying to keep you guys' attention and not bore you. These are some prior disasters that we've run. Thank you guys for your time.